Hey, hi, Malik. Let me tell you, it's an absolute pleasure and privilege to host you as part of the UiPath Reboot Work Festival, which is a global initiative, as you know. Uh, and there's a lot of content over the 3 days that we're doing this globally. And one of the things that I'm particularly looking forward to is to talk to senior executives, leaders in the business, those who have done this, those who adopted automation, and those from whom we can learn a thing or two on how you went about your journeys. What are those things that you did to make yourself as successful as you are today? So, over the next few minutes, Malik, with your permission, I'd love to ask you a few questions and get your perspective on automation and how it applies in today's world.
Sure, Murali. First of all, thanks a lot for extending this invite to us at MAS. And I'm really happy to take you through on some of our learnings and how we went through our journey and some of the successful stories as well. So glad to share them.
So let's take it from the top, Malik, with your permission. Let's just go down the point around what led you down this path in the first place. What were those uh, goals, those missions that you had in mind as you set off on this journey? What was running through your mind back then?
So morally, automation has always been in our workflows, in all of our processes, but we always had to reach out to our digital teams back then to get these automations done. So what actually started this was, there was a plethora of automations being required, and then there was a time where the digital team was being a bottleneck, and that's when we start looking out at democratizing automation. How can automation be done by folks in a business instead of reaching out to the digital arm? That's how we actually started off, by looking at RPA per se, and then that's how we stumbled upon UiPath after multiple evaluations. So to be honest, we started off this journey at the Shared Services Center of Financial and Accounting. We had a small team over there. We didn't call it a center of excellence back then. We now do have a center of excellence, but back then it was a team of 6 to 8 people from a diverse background who are willing to learn and do these things over a few drag and drops here and there rather than coding per se. So shared services because of the work, the nature of work, of course, as well as not wanting to democratize some of these automations within a governance framework is actually what led us through automation in terms of RPA, whereas previously we would always have automations with the help of the digital teams back in the organization.
So clearly, Malik, you guys have not just done this, you've done this amazingly well. You are one of the undisputed winners of the Excellence Awards for Automation last year, and the world knows that. But let me just ask you to elaborate a little bit about your start. Because a lot of organizations globally and here in our ecosystem, kind of struggle with this. Where do you start? So how did you decide what is the right starting point? Did you have a set of processes in mind? Did you look at a particular department or a certain functional area within the business that needed or could benefit from automation? So what was going on through your mind as far as the starting point? Did you have a few processes that you said you want to start with?
Sure, Murali. So like I mentioned previously, the journey began in the Shared Services Center for Finance and Accounting. And more specifically, it was on accounts payable that we thought that we had a lot of area or a lot of scope for automation. I think while we started, to be honest, we didn't have everything laid out saying this is the impact automation is going to bring to us. It ranged from freeing work up from some people. It ranged from increasing efficiencies. At the beginning, there was no clear cut saying this is what we are after, but we always started with the most monotonous work within shared services, and that was, I would say, accounts payable. Thereafter, since then, we've grown up, we've identified processes which are mundane, which could be automated simply. But yeah, the starting point was in shared services, the accounts payable department, specifically I would say, recognizing details from invoices to posting invoices to finally to automating even the payments of MAS. So yeah, that's where we started, Murli.
And it's been a fascinating journey ever since. I have personally tracked this very closely, Malik, with all our colleagues at MAS. But again, I get this a lot from our clients, and for their benefit, again, measurement is important. Metrics are important. So, how do you know? How do you measure? First of all, how do you measure the success of automation? What does
So
the C-suite look forward to in terms of measurement?
that's a very good question, Murli. I think we're still trying to find the right way of measuring it. But with years in automation, now we've grown as to when we start off an automation project, we clearly set our objective saying, what do we really want to do? Is it about reducing FTEs? Is it about increasing efficiency? Is it about increasing productivity? We on from the onset, we kind of nail in on what we are after, because at the beginning of our automation journeys, we were all over the place. We were like, okay, if you do something which was taking 10 minutes, now we're doing it over 2 minutes, then we would calculate the number of FTE reduction. But that again didn't transform into dollars, because it wasn't a full FTE, it was half of a FTE or three-quarter of FTE. What we realized was, while we are going on the journey of impact in terms of FTE reduction, we also have to work closely with the HR departments to redefine certain roles. That is when, morally, you clearly get those impacts to your bottom line, or those dollar numbers hitting. Until then, it will just be a mere saving on book saying, okay, we did this automation and therefore we have 4.5 FTEs of work being reduced. But with us, we have something called a money step in the organization, where in whatever project we do, what is that money step? So in this case, in terms of FTE reduction, it was that money step of not necessarily letting go of some people, but actually redefining roles. Because why we wanted to automate certain mundane tasks was to move up the value stream in certain processes. So that was clearly identified as one. On if you're going after reducing FTEs, it was about working closely with the HR departments to redefine these roles. So there are some projects which we go after, while FTE impacts then would bring about a dollar saving. There were some which we purely did consciously on work-life balance. If we had certain employees working after hours or during the weekend, that was the objective of the C-suite at that time. We want to ensure that our employees have a 9 to 5 job and they don't do extended hours of work, and which affects their work-life balance. So in the weekends as well. So it depends on the objectives, but now we have a clear idea when going into a project as the digital team. We know, okay, is it about, do you actually want to reduce the work, or do you actually want to reduce the time taken to do the work? It's two different objectives, whereas we get mixed up somewhere in the between at the beginning of our process, at the beginning of our RPA journey, I would say. But now we are very clear in terms of, do you actually want to reduce the work or reduce the time? Because then the lens you look at certain projects would be way different. You can't, or there can be projects, okay, you want to reduce work as well as reduce time. So that, we put in that lens when required and clear out those objectives in terms of what are we going to do, in the back end, stuff like that. But yeah, I think FTE savings, we follow the previous approach I mentioned. Work-life balance is like this, but we really you have to define the objective you're after, because otherwise, you won't get those dollar impacts which you really are pushing for, Murali.
Some fascinating points there. If I could just extend this whole notion of work is different and it's changed dramatically over the last few months owing to the COVID pandemic. Any specific learnings or anything that you've taken, can directly or indirectly impacted the way you went about your automation journey, especially in the last 3 or 4 months, once the immediate aftermath of the lockdown kind of settled down into a new way of life? What has been your experience in that regard from an automation standpoint?
So just to share one of the jokes which we went across in one of our C-suite meetings was, so we were all supposed to be working from home, and then suddenly this guy says, no, that we have a few people. We have few people working currently, pushing through some purchase orders, verifying some invoices, and then one of the CEOs was like, "What's going on?" And then only we had to elaborate that it was the bots who were working. So it has definitely come in hand, Murali, in terms of being able to run some of these processes without much intervention. I wouldn't say no intervention, but without much intervention, and we not being at work physically. There has been some challenges though in going into new projects during this lockdown, but it's taking time, but it's actually happening too. So I'm not going to say that things are not moving forward because of this. There are various reasons why things aren't moving forward. It can be due to budget constraints, etc., etc. But in terms of going into a new project, we now have a checklist which we want to go through. We prepare in advance. We share these details to our colleagues in the business who wants to do this, so that there's a lot of preparation before we actually get into things. Whereas previously, when we were actually able to meet people in person, it would be like drawing things over and getting things done there. So a bit of preparatory work in terms of going into new projects, but on the existing one, it's a no-brainer that it's helping us a great deal. Even though some processes which we automated are not 100% automated and requires no human, but at least with a click of a button now, from somewhere dispersed around Sri Lanka or around the world for that matter, things are running as it was previously. Yeah.
I guess that's why they call it the new normal, right?
Yeah, true, but I just hope that we don't go back saying this is how we work and go back to our usual processes, because this is definitely productive, and we should stick to some of these good things which we are doing during this new norm.
I agree. Some fascinating insights again. It's always a new lesson when I speak to executives from MAS. But I can't let you go as we wind this down, Malik. In terms of, I'm going to ask you for some learning, some insights, some words of wisdom that you'd like to share with those of us, either practitioners or organizations who are just about starting out on this journey. There are a lot of approaches being talked about. There's a top-down, there's a COE-led approach. There are so many things, and you've been down this path, right? And you've chosen a certain way of going about this. What comes to mind if I were to ask you for those two key learnings for those who want to start out now on automation?
I think first things first, you need to have a fantastic team with you who is willing to go that extra mile in learning and doing new things. And the second is on how you choose your projects. I think when you send out a note, for example, saying, okay, calling out all ideas for projects, you would get a plethora of emails and ideas on how to do it. But then again, it's important that we go through the impacts as well, and then decide specifically, Murali, whether, sometimes when you send out something saying share an idea, the ideas, they wouldn't care whether it's RPA or whatever. They would just share whatever ideas which come into their mind. But it's up to us to, as the digital team, to vet things out in terms of what are the highly impactful ones. For the people who are starting new, I think start with something which is really mundane and less processes, and then go up the ladder in terms of complexity. So having a good team and prioritizing your projects based on impact, I think is key to getting things done. And one more point I would like to add is how you take this out to the businesses. These can end up being just buzzwords at times, but it's always important to get the business units also with you to show the value of it. Try multiple demos, get them to get on it, have small teams across the business units, with some of the new tools, which, for example, UiPath is offering in terms of citizen development and stuff, developers and stuff like that, it's a fantastic way for the business units also to get on board, and then it's enhancing their skills as well. So that at least at MAs, that's our plan for next year, on democratizing as much as possible, and not being the bottleneck. That's the plan.
And we are right here to help you achieve those goals and exceed all expectations. Thank you so much, Malik. That is an excellent, set of answers that you put out. And I wish you all the best. I'd love to see you back in Sri Lanka, safe, and on my next available opportunity. Thank you so much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Murali. Thanks a lot for extending this invite, as well as I hope all of you will stay safe and sound during these difficult times. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.